Boy Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. It's a breaking news edition. A couple hours after the news here, getting started. Josue Pavon by my side, and Jimmy Toscano back from the fourth, joining us shortly. No John tonight.
Hey Bobby, does Grant get a tribute video or not?
A light one. You know they like to do those. They're pretty liberal with them.
Yeah, that's true.
Grant Williams gone. I don't think too big of a surprise to anyone. The way it went down here, though, is a little bit surprising. Celtics pull off a sign and trade with the Dallas Mavericks here. Long interested in Williams, long linked to him. Most recently, The Athletic had written that Atlanta, Dallas, a couple other teams, Charlotte, I think, became a hot late suitor here on the mid-level. And that's ultimately what Grant signs for here, with the Celtics helping them out. Dallas did have its mid-level. Celtics, I guess in a way, help Dallas move off a little bit of money here because they're getting hard capped by this move. And some picks coming Boston's way, I guess, as value. They were looking for a first rounder, according to reports, for Grant in a sign and trade. Instead, they'll get 3 seconds here. 2 in the immediate future, I think 2024 and 5. And the 28 is a pick swap, right? I want to say.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
So, first reaction, Josue, I'll throw it to you.
The writing was on the wall, Bobby. I know people were out there thinking that it maybe wasn't. And look, I don't think the Celtics were out there trying to trade Grant, but they were trying to maximize that deal, right? And I think matching it was out of the question for the Celtics. I don't think they were comfortable giving Grant that type of money moving forward. He's not a starter. Does he have a chance to compete for a starting position? Maybe. If you ask Joe Mazzulla, maybe he's not crazy about it. I mean, obviously, they didn't have the best relationship, wasn't the best chemistry. And I don't think, again, the organization felt comfortable giving him that amount of money. So I'm not surprised. I'm really not. I was hoping that they would get at least a player in this deal. The multiple second-round picks, that part doesn't surprise me. But I was hoping they could somehow get a little bit of both. But that's his value right now, it seems like, right? And I think the Celtics are okay with that moving forward. Obviously, you have to replace this role, though, right? How do you do that? Do you go back out there and try to trade Malcolm Brogdon? Do you call the Los Angeles Clippers and try to find something, there to position themselves to get someone, some help in the front court? But then you have to wait with this James Harden thing, how that whole situation resolves itself, where the Clippers stand after that, if the Clippers are still an option for someone like Brogdon. The TPE is valuable here in the sense of trying to match, another wing position or another guy in the front court that you can go out and get. But look, that's just where the Celtics stand right now. But they do have to replace Grant. I mean, regardless of how they feel about him and moving forward with him, that's a big void in the front court that they're going to have to fill.
Yes, and that's where I'll start. Grant, you're going to miss him. How much will depend on how the big men in his place play. And, of course, part of replacing him is Kristaps. You add a center in there who's actually going to play center. The Celtics over the last couple of years got away from Grant as a center. You didn't see much of it at all after 2020 and 2021. So he was more of a 4. Al Horford's going to slide to that spot, I'd say, more often than not. You sign O'Shea Brissett for additional depth there, but you do have 3 big men in the front court as you did a year ago, and all 3 of them now can play center, whereas Grant really couldn't with how they were aligning here. He could guard 5s, but offensively he wasn't operating in that role very often. They weren't going that small with him being the big man on the floor often per se. So you get bigger here in this offseason. You're back to double big. But you do lose some intangibles here to me, and I guess some tangible things Grant brought to the table. He was a really good perimeter defender, and Al Horford still is, but you're missing him in that regard. And as Horford ages, you were hoping Grant could slide into that position. You're missing that now, I guess, more than anything. You don't have that up and coming guy behind Horford.
You're vulnerable, right? You're very vulnerable there.
Yeah, so your depth's hit a little bit here. You don't get a ton back in this deal. Reggie Bullock goes to San Antonio as the offsetting money. I think him coming back in this deal, and I know Bernardoni threw this out there and I agreed with him, would have made people feel a little bit better about this. I think a bigger TPE coming back would have made people feel a little better about this. That was my big idea. Obviously, I got to, apologize for not knowing the base year compensation thing splits the TP in half, because Grant going to Dallas only counts as half as much of the money he's getting here. So you only get a 6-7 million-ish TP, depending on how that first year salary shakes out. Going to be closer to 7, I'd imagine, which is something. And, the second rounders are something now. It seems like that's becoming a valuable asset teams like around the NBA. Another correction, 25 is the swap. So 24 and 28 are outrights from Dallas, but it's not a ton. It's not a guy, and this is what frustrates me most, Josue, that the Celtics really prioritized here, because the biggest takeaway should be this is the deal that the Celtics offered Grant reportedly in camp. He declined it. He accepts it here from Dallas, and the Celtics obviously at this point soured on him additionally after offering that deal in camp and said, we're not doing this now. So yeah, I don't love that. I don't think the Celtics valued him minutes-wise, contract-wise, and even in the room. And we'll bring Jimmy Toscano in here for some early thoughts on this.
What up, boys?
What up, bro?
Happy, I don't want to say happy Grant Day because it's not a happy day, but happy July 5th. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
It's not a happy day for everybody, but it's a happy day for Grant Williams, I'm sure. I mean, I think he made the most money he could possibly make today. $13 million a year over 4 years. It's a good deal for him. I think we all realized that $20 million a year. We realized early on that was never going to happen. That was more of a pipe dream. And then the way things sort of shaped out for him this season, the role he ended up with, I think he has to be pretty happy financially with $13 million a year over 4 years. Now, I know, Bobby, you probably already got into what it means for the Celtics and if it's a good deal and all that stuff, or we'll get into that.
We're just getting there, yeah.
Yeah, what do you think, Jimmy?
But for Grant, I got to say congrats to Grant for making that money. I mean, we had a fun relationship with Grant on this show. I think a lot of fans would probably say the same. But at the end of the day, I think we all agree Grant's a good guy. He deserves the payday. And for that, good for him. As far as the Celtics are concerned, I'm not stunned to see this happen. I think that we all kind of wondered where he fit into their plans moving forward. Obviously, it didn't seem that Mazzulla was a big fan of his. I mean, based on the DNP CDs that he stacked up halfway through the year and the limited to basically no role that he ended up with in the playoffs. So it shouldn't be a shock to anybody to see that he's now playing for another organization. Now, is it a good thing for the Celtics? I don't know, to be determined, I guess, right? I mean, I don't think a lot of people are – I shouldn't say this because I didn't think a lot of people were going to be fired up about the Celtics draft, and I tweeted something out about it, and I got like 100 tweets basically saying that I'm an idiot, I don't understand the cap, I don't get what the Celtics are doing, and just basically John actually said it. He goes, it used to be you don't know ball, now it's you don't know the cap. So I'm sure Bobby and Josue can probably explain the reasons behind a deal like this and why they're stacking up second-round picks, and the goal is to flip them for established players or something like that.
We can do that, Jimmy, but the gist here is you could have kept Grant and you chose not to.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, they chose not to. And am I stunned? Am I stunned by that? No. I'm a little surprised because you're in a situation right now, if you're the Boston Celtics, you want to get better, right? You don't want to get worse.
The price is a little prohibitive here, Jimmy, but you've covered a million signings in a million different sports. And I think like Bogarts was the latest one where you're like, whoa. Like walking out the door, you're just like, whoa, this number's crazy. And
that was a crazy deal.
Different situation. But is this a deal you look at and go, whoa, they couldn't do this?
It's not a deal I look at and go, whoa, but it's literally the most I thought Grant was probably going to make. And I think if the Celtics signed him, I would have said, I mean, all right. I mean, they obviously think this guy is going to have a bigger role than he had last season to give him $13 million. This seems like a deal that like the Knicks would sign. Like this is like a Knicks, like it's like a player who is average and he's getting $13 million a year. Is it a tradable contract? Sure, it's a tradable contract because it's $13 million a year. But I'd be surprised if there's anybody out there who's going to be like, yeah, we need Grant Williams. Like he's the focal point of the trade that we're looking for. He's a salary cap, match guy, right? I mean, he's a role player. He's situational. He's going to be on a completely new team now, so it will be interesting to see how he fits in with those guys and what role he has there. But on the Celtics team, let's face it, he was, at best, he was going to give you 20 okay minutes, and give you some energy and hustle. I'm not going to fault him for firing Jimmy Butler up. That was, a lot of people.
One of his final moments.
That'll be the last thing that
the bear.
That'll be the last thing people say about him. But to be honest, I think that was, something that he should be, commended for, and not, to an extent. You want to have attitude, you want to show that fire. And when he played hard. He may not have, he wasn't the most talented guy in the court, but he played hard. He played tough. He probably played a little bit too, more out of his pay grade sometimes than he should have. Maybe that was an issue and why he found himself on the bench at times. But at the end of the day, Bobby, it's not a lot of money, but it clearly was too much for the Celtics to pay based on where they see their future going with some of the guys that are either on this team or they're looking at the future, and maybe they're seeing other teams that are going to have some players that they're going to need to offload at some point, and they see those guys as potential targets, whether it's this season or down the road. So, Grant Williams is who he is. I don't think he's going to change much going to another team. Maybe he gets more playing time, but I think we kind of know the type of player that he is at this point.
Yeah, it's a commitment, right, Jimmy? I feel like the team just wasn't ready to make that commitment with Grant. And People can say what they want about what happened last year, relationship with Joe Mazzulla, but at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. Is did they trust this guy enough to put him into their future? It is long term, especially now in the NBA, right, with the new CBA and having a guy on the books for another 4 years that you not quite sure what his role is, right? He never really defined that. And sure, he didn't hit it off with Mazzulla. It changed a lot. Things were different when Ime was around. You can make that argument for sure, but you can also say that if this team isn't comfortable with giving him that type of money and he's not even a starter, I mean, do you really fault him for that? I mean, obviously we have to wait to see how they finish up this offseason. I don't think they're done here, but I think when we look back at this offseason, we'll say, well, yeah, of course others didn't give him that kind of money because look at what happened the season before. And, Bobby, you bring up a good point, too. We talk about Joe Mazzulla, but you mentioned right before Jimmy hopped on how things were in the locker room, how the team responded. That whole poke the bear thing, how no one had his back on that. I mean, look, I'm not saying that he was a cancer or anything in the locker room or anything like that.
They didn't endorse him.
No one endorsed him.
They didn't.
I wouldn't say no one. I think Tatum stood in his corner.
But to me,
that night, though, I feel like that night it said a lot.
No, yeah. That night he didn't, but I think generally Tatum stood.
Generally, he's the one guy that would joke around and say like it rents his guy and all that.
Right.
But I don't think it's one of the. Again, I don't think it was this team is like, man, we need to get him out of here. But he's replaceable. I just think that's what it came down to. That we can replace this guy, and if we can save a whole lot of money doing it, let's do that because we have this massive supermax or close to supermax, whatever the situation is with Jaylen right now, that they have to tend to after all these offseason moves are done.
He is replaceable, Josue, and I think that's what it came down to. Easily what? Replaceable?
Yeah.
On a team like this,
not
should be.
Not today. I mean, listen, when it comes down to it, are the Celtics worse today than they were before the trade, assuming it's either Grant Williams or draft picks? Yeah, they're worse. They lost a guy who was a part of their team for, who knows, a few picks that maybe they can flip. I would imagine the goal is that they could flip them down the road. But roster-wise, yeah, they're a little bit worse. So if you're a Celtics fan today, you're not thrilled about what's happened over the last, couple weeks, right? I mean, it seems like there's a delicate balance here of trying to, stay a team that's considered a title contender or one of the best teams in the league, but also try to prepare for, these cap situations that are going to come down the line and giving a ton of money to Jaylen Brown, which I know we're going to get into that at some point later on in the show. So there's obviously way more going on that it's way more complicated than just, do we want to give Grant Williams, $54 million over 4 years or whatever it was. Was that what that? Yeah. $54 million over 4 years. So
there's a lot of moving parts here. Yeah. And we'll see what happens, but all we can do is talk about what's here
exactly.
Today.
Yeah.
And they lost.
So you would have done it, Bobby? It sounds like you would have done it.
if this is it, if this is the roster, I think you should have done it.
That's why Brad can't be finished there. He's got to have another move.
Not necessarily, because this might be a money thing. They might want to stay under the second apron this year. If you want to have that sustainability of having your pick in 7 years, obviously I don't think that's a big deal.
No, Bobby wants his boy O'Shea to grab that spot, Jimmy. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
No, I mean, they're different players, and this is why I say it's not easy to replace Grant. If we're being real, if we're being fair, and I know Grant's another guy like Smart who drove people crazy at times, this is a guy who shot 40% steadily. I mean, every time they throw him into the game, Jimmy, in the playoffs, he'd just start nailing threes, and we'd be like, whoa, why isn't he playing? The defense came and went. 2022, he was excellent. He was a key part of those wins over the Bucks and Heat, guarding Bam and Giannis. It was extraordinary what he did that year, and that obviously isn't who he is. That was his peak performance there, but he was still a super versatile defender that you could throw in a bunch of different lineups here. Not to mention, Jimmy, as we talk about leadership throughout the postseason and the lack of it here, this is a guy who tried, back to that Butler situation. Caught a lot of flack for it. A very weird fallout to that, as Josue said, the team not stepping up for him in that moment.
Hated it. I absolutely hated it. It said more about the team. It said more about the team than it did Grant, as far as I was concerned.
And it reflected a year where they really relegated him. And, there was reporting after the season that Tatum and Brown went to Joe and was like, you got to play this guy more. That surprised me because it almost felt like Joe was carrying out players not being crazy about him or his antics or whoever else. And you know what it was at the end of the day, Jimmy? I don't think this front office loved them. They bring in Gallinari. They try to replace him that way. That doesn't work. They bring in Muscala, try to replace him that way. That doesn't work. Now they're bringing in O'Shea Brissett. We'll see. They have a lot of draft picks. They have Jordan Walsh. But they don't think he's worth the money, Jimmy. That's all this says. And maybe not, but the thing about these deals is you can sign them and trade them down the line. They're not difficult to move. And to give them up for, yes, you get a couple seconds here, and we'll see how those play out. But you're a championship team that lost a nice depth piece here for nothing, effectively, today.
I mean, that's the half of it that people on your side agree with. You lost a guy who is a piece. And how big of a piece I think is up for debate, and that's where the deal comes into play. Yeah, you lost a guy that contributed to a championship caliber team. However, Bobby, they came up short. They came up short this year.
Did you need to shake this up?
They came up short the year before. They've come up short in prior years, and I know Grant isn't part of all those. But
it is 2020.
Sure, there you go. So there's I'm not saying it's Grant's fault, but they are doing what a lot of fans wanted them to do, which is shake things up a little bit. And you can't just bring it back. Not after the way it's gone the last couple. You say, oh, well, they got to the NBA Finals. Oh, they got to Eastern Conference Finals. Sure. But the expectations changed throughout the course of the year. And in that sense, they underperformed both years based on the roster they had.
And I think that, the Smart move's more indicative of that. This one to me is just a little bit of money trimming along the perimeter.
It might be. You know what? Yeah. Unfortunately for Grant, I guess.
And that happens. If John was here, he'd say you can't keep everybody.
Exactly. You can't. And Grant isn't good enough. I hate to say it. Grant isn't good enough to just say, oh, we'll figure it out later. He's not. He's just not. He's not that. He's not an all-star caliber player. You don't just say, oh, you got to do whatever you can to keep this guy and, figure it out. No, I mean, as a GM, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. You can't just say, oh, we're going to bring everybody back or, we're going to pay this tax or that tax. And I get it. Like the new CBA now makes it extremely complicated for, I guess the regular fan, the average fan to understand,
the implications,
the implications, the pitfalls, like the ramifications of course of just re-signing guys. And that, to be honest, that kind of sucks. I think it sucks for the brand a little bit. I think when something's so complicated that it's hard to make an argument one way or the other, it kind of ruins the whole point of like following the team or making debates and
that's true.
Wanting players to come back. It's like, oh, well, they had to do it because if they don't, XYZ is going to happen in 2 years or
But it's
whatever.
the same as the tax was, Jimmy. You could always say, oh, a tax, blah, 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 blah. The guy's gone. but you can always deal with the consequences of that. And I know there's more
Now it's
team-building
harder, though.
consequences.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's more tangible basketball reasons you might not want to do this. But as I've said all along, I don't find them that impactful. Especially, we actually got the document, read through it a week ago or so here, and it's just you lose a pick in 7 years. You can't sign a mid-level guy. It's not a huge deal. The one thing that is a big deal is if you go over the line, doing trades becomes a
That's what
little bit
it
more
is, Bobby.
complicated
It's
here.
that's the biggest thing, I think, is doing trades.
Yeah, having flexibility. And yes, as you say, in general, not having this contract on the books makes you a little bit more flexible. But would you have done it, Josue? Would you have matched?
Nah.
Me neither.
All right.
4 years,
It's a
4 years,
commitment.
54.
And like you said, Bobby, teams are going to get even, they're gonna try to find ways to save money, and it's going to be even harder to trade them down the road. I mean, maybe not, but Celtics weren't willing to take that risk right now. They just can't. They have to try to,
Bobby, you can get a corner three-point
they got to
shooter.
clear the books as much as they
Sorry.
can.
You can use the percentages all you want, but he's getting set up for these wide open threes in the corner. This isn't a guy that's creating his own shots. He's not a focal point of anybody's offense. He never will be. He's
Fair
an
enough,
energy
but
guy on
40% is
defense.
a big number.
Fine,
That's
but
a
you can
big,
find
big
that.
number.
You can find that. If you have enough talent on the floor to open things up, you can stick a guy in the corner, and he should be able to get you close to 40%. And really, what are we talking about? 38% or 40% at the end of the day? I mean, it's when you hit the shots, right? So if he couldn't be counted on, apparently he couldn't be counted on according to Mazzulla in a lot of key games. And I know that Mazzulla finally went to him and he did hit some shots. But if that's a general feeling, who cares what your percentage is? If you're only taking, 2 shots a game, and averaging 13 minutes a game, and you're coming in the beginning of the second quarter, who freaking cares?
So that's not what I'm frustrated is. The move itself isn't what I'm frustrated with as much as how they handled it throughout the year.
Who'd they get? Can we go over the actual
relegate
deal?
him. Yeah, they got in this deal 3 second-round picks. They get a $6-7 million TP, give or take, because that's something that makes me feel a little bit worse about this deal too. Is you're not getting that full salary as a TPE. That would have given you the flexibility to go out and get a guy who makes that money this year if you want to do that. If you just said Grant's not this guy, let's go get someone else who makes this money. But $6-7 million isn't getting you a ton. It only lasts till the end of the season. So if they're trying to stay under that second apron line this year, you can't use it. So that might just end up going to waste like the Fournier TP did. So, you're getting some seconds here.
Would you have wanted Fournier, Bobby? Would you have wanted that Fournier deal?
No. So looking back on that, that's another deal I wanted them to do that
there you go.
Was the wrong move. And maybe Grant will prove that way too. Maybe he just doesn't break through in Dallas. They have to dump him. Doesn't end up making a good deal. And the Celtics look good here because they've made that right call before. I think that was under Brad, right? Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
A lot of people would say they made the right call on Gordon Hayward too, who can't stay on the court still.
That was Danny.
Right. But there's a lot of people would say
they drew a line.
Right. They've made some good calls on letting guys go or just not re-signing guys, whether it was their choice or not, Kyrie, whoever you want to go down the line on certain players.
Let's get into what they need to do next. I think it's a good time right now. We got a
the 3 seconds. One was it 2024, I think. One was it 2025, and one was it 2028.
The 25 is a swap.
It's the swap.
And the 28, I believe, is unprotected. All those unprotected.
So they're still doing my plan. They're stacking seconds to trade up for Bronny James, right? And then they will get LeBron James in free agency.
This is what Jimmy thinks motivating the boatload of seconds that they collect in here. They obviously got 3 or 4 on draft night.
Yeah, that was apparently according to my Twitter, that was the greatest draft in Celtics history. By the way, I don't know if you guys heard.
You got a first in the Smart deal, in the end from Golden State, and all those picks from draft night. So you get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish seconds here, and a first out of all this, and then of course Walsh comes in as well from that Smart deal. So you're definitely kicking assets into the future. You're definitely loading up on some assets to make some new moves. The Celtics really didn't have future seconds going into this offseason, but they're also not hard to acquire. I wouldn't get caught up on they got a lot out of these seconds here. Are they all Dallas picks? Because you got to think Dallas is going to continue to be pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Unless
say that.
Unless this Kyrie thing goes haywire.
Dude, how about Kyrie and Grant as a duo? That's gonna be fun to watch. Those
He didn't get to experience it. He came in after Kyrie left.
I know.
Right,
So
yeah.
Kyrie's in for a rude awakening.
By the way,
He's gonna be like, Grant, can you stop talking for 5 minutes?
was this their last?
Grant thought Jaylen didn't like him. Wait until he meets Kyrie.
By the way, and this goes back to can you easily replace him? Grant took a little while to develop here. Again, 2020 didn't play a ton. 2021 wasn't on the court at all, and he just seemed like an awful pick right in there with Romeo and the other stuff they did that year. He became pretty good. They developed him well, became a great shooter. It took a little bit of time here. So if you're bringing in young guys like Jordan Walsh, it takes time. And that's what's tough about letting a guy like this go who you invested a lot in. But we'll get in.
Make the case he only gave you one good year.
Of course.
So he got $54 million on one good year. Congrats to Grant. I'm telling you.
He stuck with it, though. I'll always remember Grant for that. I mean, remember how his career started?
Totally. I'm being harsh, but
he missed, what was it, like
25 straight
25 three-pointers. And, like, obviously that was a focal point in his game. And look what happened. He turned into a 40% three-point shooter. And obviously it's a big reason why I think he got this money, and I think he fits well in Dallas. I think it's going to be a good role for him.
All right, let's take a quick break here for a sponsor, and we'll be right back to talk about what the Celtics need to do next. Minute to tell everybody about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose, that's $200. You can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/Boston to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Bobby, that was not your hand. Whose hand was that?
Oop, we're back.
Oh, we lost Jimmy now.
Lost Jimmy.
So the ad took him out.
All right, pop back in, Jimmy. Yeah, didn't sneak in the bathroom break on time, Josue. I tried.
That was pretty quick. That's something that you used to do back in the day on radio.
Yeah.
Not bad.
All right, shout out to FanDuel, FanDuel.com/Boston. What do they need to do next here, Josue? Is this it?
No, it can't be. Can't be it. They got to address the front court one way or another. Maybe it doesn't cost them Brogdon. Maybe that's not the case, but then I don't know that.
Yes.
Yeah, we got you now.
All right, real quick, Josue, before we get started. What did I just watch? We're not doing live reads anymore?
Oh, yeah, you haven't been on in a while.
One of the commercials.
Yeah.
Bobby, you sound like David Allen Boucher on that read, dude. I know whether to bet or to slip into my PJs and chill. Quite the voice on that read. I gotta tell you though,
Youngins might not remember.
I didn't catch you. I tried to sneak in a bathroom break there, Jimmy.
I mean, Youngins might not remember David Allen, but that's a great call.
Yeah, it was a throwback to the OGs who was that Magic 106.7.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy about him? One day I was like, what's this guy look like? I gotta figure out what this guy. I went on their website. It's just a shadow. Like
yeah.
You never know.
Can't see him?
Serious.
You don't know who he is.
No, but you
or
know that
what
voice.
he is.
You know that voice.
You know that voice. Anyways, all right. Yeah, I'm sad if I can't cut in on ad reads anymore. I'm gonna have to.
He actually just retired a year ago. It feels like so long ago, but that was last year.
Did he, Josue?
Yeah. It's not as nearly as big as it was before, but yeah, it was last year.
Should we? Do you know what everyone wants to talk about right now? And we should just
David Allen Boucher.
Boston DJs, legend.
We'll get to why what they need to do next year and the Grant stuff at the end. But people are asking and people want to hear us talk about why the Celtics haven't signed Jaylen Brown.
We're trying to keep him on a little bit longer, but okay.
No, this is big. We got to talk about this. We got to address it. Why haven't they done this? All these extensions started flying through. Desmond Bane, Tyrese Halliburton. I don't think any other Supermaxes have come through here. I can't think of who's available off the top or who's eligible off the top, but he was eligible to sign this when July opened, and it hasn't happened, and there really haven't been whispers about it, just reassurance that it's going to happen at some point, and they're just focused on other things. Well, the Grant thing's done. You would have to think this is going to come through in the short future, if that's true.
You would have to think, but you wonder if there's some negotiating going on here, right? Maybe that's something Celtics have to take into consideration.
That's the most likely explanation, right?
Well, after the Kristaps Porzingis trade, and obviously Jason Tatum coming up, but yeah, the Grant move certainly pushes things further, right? I feel like the Celtics should be close to that point, but I think with everything else going on in the NBA, though, all these big names that are being, involved in trade rumors, trade requests, obviously. I think if you're the Celtics, you're smart in waiting to see how everything, how the dust settles after all that, and see if you can get in there and get somebody else or do some kind of deal that falls into your lap, so to speak, right? So I think there's a big part of that as well. But if I was a betting man, I say they get this thing done.
So you're talking about trading him?
No, not trading Jaylen. I mean, like trying to do another deal for one of those guys that get left out to the side of one of those trades.
Right? Not signing Jaylen doesn't prevent you from doing that. Jaylen's money starts next year. His money's the same this year, $30 million. So these explanations I keep reading that
I'll give you an explanation.
Yeah, but if you're trading for a guy with 2-3 years on his deal, it kind of changes things, right? I feel like the Celtics have to kind of, the Jaylen thing I feel like isn't going. I mean, are you afraid he's going to be offended or something? I mean, if you're the Celtics, it's not like he's going to say, you know what? No, you took too long.
No, it's just weird. It's not something you use. If
it's a little weird, but Bob, when you think about Tatum, obviously, not too far from his extension. I mean, that's historic. Celtics will be the first to have two super.
Right. So let's start with that, Jimmy. Do you think that's what it is here? They're trying to give him a haircut here and try to get less than the Supermax.
This is what happened. What was it? July? Wait, so
1st.
July. Tomorrow is what's tomorrow? Tomorrow's
the moratorium ends.
Okay. Means nothing then for what we're talking about. So
not really.
I think what happened on July 1st is all the green teamers, all the diehard fans, they stayed up late. They waited. They waited and they waited. They thought it was going to happen.
You're speaking over there, Jimmy.
Sorry, it's this thing. They kept refreshing Twitter and they waited and they waited. I kept talking to people saying, "Oh, any minute now. Talk to me when he signs the max deal." To me, it's very obvious why he hasn't signed a max deal yet, because a max deal isn't being offered. Otherwise, what's the problem? I mean, dude, if you're Jaylen Brown, you're not too busy to sign a $300 million contract. And if you're the Celtics trying to prove that
some of the stuff I'm reading is ridiculous. Oh, he's overseas. They just haven't talked about it. Come on.
See, that's what I hate to say it, but there are some people who are just in denial about a lot of things in life. And if you're a Celtics fan, you might be in denial about some things related to the Celtics. And one of those things, I would be stunned at this point if he's getting a max offer. And whether or not you think he deserves it or not is a different story. But the point is, they might be offering him 5 years. I'll tell you what, I tweeted this a couple of days ago yesterday because I thought it was interesting. Windhorst was on ESPN and he said something about 5 years, $270 million is a lot of money. And I know that he probably just misspoke, but it got me thinking, wow, I wonder if he heard something thinking that maybe that's what the offer is. Or maybe it's $5 million
about that, Jimmy.
a year.
This is a 5-year deal. So if it was 270, you're cutting like $2-3 million a year off the deal. Like, does that make any impact at all?
$5 million. 5 times 5 is 25, right?
Yeah.
Don't make me do math. Yeah, it's 25. It's $5 million a year. I mean, Bobby, these are real dollars.
That's a tax bracket, I guess. Yeah.
These are real dollars, Bobby. I don't know. Like, this isn't like funny money here.
So you think it's a money thing that they're just trying to cut down the money here?
I don't know. What else could it be? It's not going to be. What else could it be at this point?
At the end of the day, no.
Don't they have leverage? Don't the Celtics have leverage here?
They have leverage.
So if you're a businessman, if you're a good one, you're not just gonna, blow all your money just because you want everybody to feel good. You got to make the smart business decision. Jaylen Brown can make a ton of money still on the Celtics, more than he can on any other team. So it's still in his best interest to sign a deal if, in fact, the Celtics are offering him, close to what the max is. But at the end of the day, they have to decide on whether or not just like they have to decide with every other star that's come and gone through Boston over the years. Jaylen Brown's not the first one, right? And he won't be the last. So I don't know what the reason is why Jaylen Brown hasn't signed a deal yet, or why it didn't happen at the strike of whatever the time was supposed to be, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. But to me, my antennas are up now, and they've been up for a couple of days now because there's no word coming out. Nothing's come out, right? It's been very, very quiet.
So we talked about
Jimmy's
this.
got Dame on the mind.
I'm gonna go.
That's
there.
interesting. That's very interesting.
I think they could be waiting here. Hey, you never know.
We talked about giving him a haircut. Does that help you? Does it make any impact? Blah, 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 blah. I think when we talked about this last, we all agreed that, or I guess I don't know who agreed on what, but we mentioned, is it worth pissing him off and getting into that give and take, or even kicking it to next offseason when he becomes a free agent over trying to save a couple $1 million a year here? I don't think so.
Is it worth pissing him off? Bobby, he's going to make more money than anyone could ever dream of in a million years. Like, if you're talking about a guy that you're worried about pissing him off over a few $1 million, then that's the only reason he wants to play for you is for the max deal.
He wants to get every cent possible, I'm sure.
Well, isn't that just great? Isn't that just awesome? And that everyone has to tiptoe around him and roll out the red carpet and do every freaking thing humanly possible to make this guy happy. How about just being happy and being happy?
It's a business, Jimmy. He feels like he's worth every cent of that. He earned all NBA.
And maybe he is. And maybe he is. Maybe that's fine. It's a business on both sides. Just like
he's gonna say Tatum's gonna get this eventually. So why aren't I too? Like, are they gonna try to give Tatum a haircut?
I think everyone would agree that Tatum's
right, but he doesn't look at it this way.
Deal.
I'm just trying to explain
that's
what
fine.
He's probably coming at it as.
Well,
I don't think it's
because
the money.
because he doesn't understand reality. Everyone's supposed to just cater to his.
No, I'm just
beliefs.
trying to explain his perspective, and maybe the Celtics are trying to give him a haircut here and do a fair deal from their perspective. But you know how teams are, Jimmy. They give their max guy the max, and this is.
And what happens?
Weird stuff.
It
what
depends
happens
how you feel
later?
about your guy.
Depending who it is.
So here's my take, Jimmy, and this isn't informed.
This what?
This isn't informed.
Oh,
I don't think that there's no reporting behind this.
This
But
isn't informed. Here we go. Uninformed take coming at you.
I think they're intensely debating this Lillard thing. And you're getting, there's some rumblings here too. Haynes reported today that they've reached out about Lillard.
I heard that.
You can dream up any scenario you want here. Rob, Grant, this or that. Well, Grant's obviously out of the picture now. Brogdon, picks. It's not happening without Jaylen. I think there's a real debate going on behind the scenes here of whether or not they should do a Brown for Lillard deal. And it's not getting out, which is smart. We talked about this. It shouldn't get out if they're considering something like this. I'm sure they haven't offered Brown because then it would get out. But I think they're talking long and hard about this because once you sign Brown to the Supermax deal...
They can't get Lillard without giving up Brown. That's what you're saying.
Yes, and once you sign Brown to the Supermax deal, you can't trade him for a year. So you're out on Lillard.
I understand that, yeah.
So I think, forget the money, forget him being in Paris and not having his phone on him. I think they're debating Brown for Lillard right now. Because again, you can pay Brown $50 million or you can pay Lillard $50 million. And that's a real debate. Who's worth $50 million? Like you said, Jimmy, if you don't think Brown's worth $50 million, you're not going to try to cut $5 million a year, do this or that. You're going to trade him for a guy that you think is worth that. And maybe they look at Lillard or someone in there looks at Lillard and says, this is who we need to go get. Talk about a shakeup.
His contract right now, year over year, is fine. It's the last year that everyone's like.
The last 2 years
about.
where the extension starts, yeah.
Right.
Those are big. Those are wild numbers. Right now, it's fair money.
So what do you think, Josue? Is this something they should think about?
I think it's something worth considering. I think it's something that you have to talk to Tatum about a little bit, see what he thinks. I don't think that he should be the ultimate guy who decides what happens there, but you have to see how he feels about something like this, right? And
and wasn't there reporting from March?
I was going to say, according to reports, he's been trying to recruit, quote unquote, or has been trying to get that idea into Lillard's
head. And that's
head.
a big deal, Jimmy, because again, it's a pipe dream to land Lillard without Brown. So if Tatum's out there recruiting him, that says a lot.
Well, how does
I don't
Jaylen feel
even
about
know.
that, right?
Yeah.
You know, does that include
And again, I
him
think that's
leaving?
something that was just said on TV
Most
or
likely,
something.
right?
But
Yeah. I'm not going to put too much stock into that because who knows what could happen.
yeah,
What players are saying to each other. And, you know, maybe Tatum does think there's a way that they can get Lillard and keep Brown. When you're a player, you just want to stack talent. You don't really care about.
yeah, you're not thinking about
you're
the
not
cap
GM.
and how the trades work.
Yeah, like I mean, you expect these guys to understand the ins and outs of the cap. They don't. That's not a knock on them. Nobody understands them really. But point is, if a guy like Lillard's available, he's like, yeah, that would be sick to get Lillard. Like that doesn't mean like screw Jaylen Brown. That just means like, oh, it'd be awesome to get him now.
Right, exactly. You don't know what that means for Tatum. Right. Yeah.
Now the problem, the cons about Lillard are his age, right, getting up there in basketball years now, and obviously the money. And he's had maybe the Celtics
abdominal injuries.
Yeah, he's had some injuries. Years. He hasn't had like the knee issues that like Kemba Walker had. That I think some Celtics fans have PTSD about, which I can understand. Jaylen Brown, a lot younger, going into the prime of his career. Currently a Celtic, second team All-NBA, All-Star. You can go down the line of why Jaylen Brown deserves to, get a max deal, I guess. Some people feel he does. Some people feel he doesn't. Where the Celtics at is really what it comes down to. If they feel Jaylen Brown's a max player, they probably don't care to trade him for Damian Lillard if they really feel that he's good enough to give this amount of money to and that he can help them win a championship. Because they already know what they have, as opposed to trading for a guy that's an unknown, a guy that I guess the other knock is apparently he only wants to go to one team.
So that's the big thing. He brings up Miami. This is a real problem here if they're thinking about doing this. It's almost similar to KG, Jimmy. Remember KG? And I don't know all the particulars, Josue too. KG didn't really want to come here, did he? And he needed to do an extension, and he needed to have some assurance that he was bought in. It's different with Lillard because he signed so long, but a lot of the reporting out there is that he only wants to go to Miami and that other teams aren't thrilled about doing it if he's not committed to those situations.
In this scenario, it would be like what Phoenix meant to that trade, right? Remember that, Jimmy? But then they realized, or Garnett realized, wait, there's not going to be a whole lot left in Phoenix once they make this deal. So Boston made a lot more sense when you look at the assets, right?
So you could do it and try to convince them, and obviously there's a relationship with Tatum there, but there was that Chris Haynes interview, I think weeks ago now, maybe even a month ago, where they asked him, Boston, they got a lot to offer. They got Brown, and he laughed. He was like, it's not going to be Boston. He laughed on the air to that question. So
it's just kind of weird. The whole Lillard stuff is just weird because all years and years he wants to stay in Portland. He's loyal, and I understand like feelings change, but to go from one extreme to the opposite, just like that, where it's like you want to go from sticking it out in Portland and putting a winning team together to actually I'm gonna kind of screw Portland here and not want to play for. I'm not gonna let them trade me to a team that makes sense for them. But I'm only going to play for this one team. Hey, buddy, you don't have a no trade clause. I hate to tell you. So you don't have that power. You're not a child. You shouldn't.
Right. So that's where the Celtics come in.
Cry and piss and moan about it because you didn't go to your favorite team that you wanted to go to. That's just not, or it shouldn't be reality. And like,
and we're so used to
players, man.
We're so used to the players prevailing in these situations. But let's be real. If he gets traded to Boston, he's signed through 2027 or 2026 with the player option. So that's 3 seasons he's signed for. He's going to sit out or like stop trying, or it just doesn't seem realistic to me that he'd derail this situation.
I don't think he would. And if you're the Trailblazers, you just straight up take the best offer. Now, if Lillard coming out or if reports coming out that Lillard only wants to play for the Heat, if that's preventing teams from giving you good offers, then that sucks. But if you're the Blazers, you have to trade him for the best offer. It doesn't matter where you trade him to. You've already done enough for him over the years. You've given him as much money as you've given him. You've done your best to put winning teams around him at points. I'm not saying last year was one of those, obviously, but they've done good by Lillard throughout his career. I don't think they owe it to Lillard to make sure that they trade him to the only team that he wants to play on.
Right. So that's the particulars there. And that's why you'd have to exceed Miami's offer. Everyone's saying, oh, Miami's offer is terrible. You'd have to convince Portland that it's worth, ruffling feathers with that agent or whatever it might be, things that they're concerned about into the future if they send Lillard somewhere he doesn't want to go. So you'd have to make it worth Portland's while. The tricky thing is Jaylen signed 1 year. So he has no staying power in Portland unless they're, in agreement with him, wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to get something done at the end of the year because the money is fairly comparable. The Blazers get Jaylen's bird rights. I think it's 200 something. He'd be leaving a lot of money on the table here compared to just signing the Supermax, but he could end up getting, significant money there from Portland once he hits free agency. He can't extend for big money now, so he would be going to free agency at that point. It's risky from Portland's perspective, but if they like Jaylen and they view him as a starting point, it would be his team at that point, which I know would probably be desirable to him in some way.
It's just risky. You have no idea. The guy's going to go to free agency and he's going to get 100 or not 100, but he's going to get as many max deals as he possibly can.
So other teams can't offer him a ton, and it's only 4 years versus 5 years at that point. But if he doesn't want to be in Portland, he doesn't have to at that point.
Right.
This is all stuff that's going to be figured out if a deal like this got done. The side that's interesting for us, obviously, is do you want Lillard? I think there's a strong case.
It's a juicy question.
Your biggest issue in recent years has been crunch time. He's one of the best crunch time players in recent history. I mean, look at the moments he's had in those situations over the years, in the playoffs too. Your issue's been ball handling at times. There's a high-level point guard, high-level ball handler.
He's going to say it.
And, again, balancing who do you want to pay $50 million to per year, Brown or Lillard? I'm a no.
Whoa, after all that?
Yeah, that's kind of build up.
After all that?
I'm a no, and it's close. I think there's a real debate. I think it's very enticing if you don't want to pay Brown that $50 million. Give it to Lillard, who I think is proven and shown that he's worth that. But I'm not doing it. Why? Number one.
You're scared.
A little bit, but that's number 3.
All right, what's number 1?
Number 1, you've done this before. Irving, Isaiah, blah, 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 down the line. You've had that smaller point guard, Kemba, and it hasn't worked. Number 2, he's what? 33? And at the end of this deal, he's 36.
Dinosaur.
It reminds me a little bit of Kemba. 1,000,000 miles, 1,000,000 postseasons. He's given his best basketball at this point.
And Kemba was 30 when he came, right?
Yeah. So I'm worried, and injuries in recent seasons with Lillard too. So I'm worried you're giving up a young, talented player in Brown. And the Brown discourse has gotten so ridiculous, by the way, but that's a conversation for another time. You're giving up a young wing, by the way, in Brown, a more valuable position than point guard. For a couple good years left of Lillard, making exorbitant money on this next deal, I'm a no. And I'm scared, Jimmy.
Okay.
Where are you at, Josue?
Yeah, I'm a no too. I mean, it's interesting. It's intriguing, especially
intriguing
when you think about that 2-year, 3-year window that they would have. But then what happens after that, right? Now, the other coin of that is
we all die.
I'm not going to sit here and say that Jaylen signs his max deal and then all of a sudden he stays and they go off and win 3 or 4 championships. No, I don't have those green goggles on, guys. Like, look, I gotta see it to believe it. I don't know if Jaylen even finishes out this contract, but
that's another factor.
I'll take the Celtics risking that over putting Dame into the situation. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, here you go, man. Here's the keys. That Marcus used to sit right here. You're the new starting point guard. Again, it's intriguing. I love to see what that team would look like for the next couple of years, but I don't think it's a promising core that's gonna go out and win you 3-4 champions. You know what I mean? I don't think you see a new dynasty. I just think you see a 2 or 3 year window where you have a crack at it. And the same thing could be said about Jaylen as well. But I feel like with Jaylen, there's more security in the sense of he's been through it, right? He's ready to take that next step, or at least it seems that way. Look, historically, year after year, he gets better and better. in terms of being that leader, and when you need him down the stretch, he's got to still prove that. Obviously, off of this Game 7, the way this team went out.
No, and there's a little bit more security there, as you said, Josue, and a guy who's going to be signing a 5-year deal, not necessarily asking out after the first year or two. Wouldn't be a good look. I don't think it would go well, and I don't think it'd be that effective for him ending up where he wants to be after this deal. Lillard, on the other hand, has already expressed through reports and Haynes that he doesn't want to be in Boston. So
exactly. If that's the case, then
would he put up with it for a year and be like, I'm done if it doesn't go well? I mean, these are the questions you got to ask, Jimmy. Who gives you more security is another factor here, Brown or Lillard.
Yeah.
So would you do it?
It's really hard. I'll say this. If it comes out that Lillard's having a change of heart and he's talked to, maybe KG or somebody who's like, hey, man, Boston's legit, I would do it. If you find out that Lillard's all in on Boston, and honestly, I think he would love it here. Pretty much every player aside from Kyrie has. I can't really even think of any who haven't. I know that's crazy for people to want it, for fans of other teams and people from other cities to want to admit, but players love playing in Boston. For the Celtics, they love playing in Boston against the Celtics. It's one of the best places to just play basketball. And Lillard's a gamer. That isn't to say Jaylen isn't either, but I think they would be a great match. And I've been saying for the last year that I want like a big change to happen because I just don't like the mental makeup and the
this
DNA
would be an overhaul though
of this team. Also, yeah. Bobby, you compared Lillard to Kemba, and I did earlier. Talent-wise, there's no comparison. Lillard, to me, is almost, and again, there's no like
today.
Today, we can only live for today, Bobby.
Right. Well, you can project 26 years old versus 33.
Yeah, and listen, there's pros and cons to it. That's why it's not an easy choice. I'm not saying it's like you definitely do this, no questions asked. But when it goes down to it, do I also think that Jaylen Brown is a $60 million? I don't think as highly of Jaylen Brown as other people do. So that's why I'm leaning towards making that trade if you find out that Lillard is all aboard and is willing to buy in. And I think that combination of Tatum and Lillard, to me, that's a better combination right now than Tatum and Brown has been. And I know that they've been a great duo, and they've passed so many, historical marks per, at certain games. But when it comes down to it, if you're talking about championships, I think that Lillard's a great match. Can play alongside Tatum. It helps you with that guard position. You just got rid of Marcus Smart. I mean, there's still other needs that you're gonna have to address, and so that's kind of where I'm at. But do I think it's gonna happen? No, I actually don't think it's gonna happen. I think Jaylen Brown will sign a deal with the Celtics, and they will, bring those two back together and see what happens. And honestly, if that happens, I don't think you'll find too many people kicking and screaming about it. I think it's still the extreme, most likely situation. But the fact that this player is available at this point in time does make it a very intriguing option for me. So that's where I'm at with it. So yeah, I mean, gun ahead, I can't do it unless I know Lillard's in. I don't know enough. It sounds like he's not. So in that sense, I'm probably not doing it. But if I heard or got an inkling, or if the Celtics found out that he was, and
but what would he do? I mean,
they would do. You know what he needs, Jimmy? He needs that conversation with Chauncey Billups.
Bobby, I'm just tired. I don't want divas who are going to be kicking and screaming.
Billups had that conversation with KG, man. He was one of the guys that convinced him.
Right.
There you go. Right. So
you need to be convinced. You're right, Jimmy.
I don't think Portland's at that point. Portland's not at that point where they want to convince him.
What's so good about Portland? He stayed there for that. Portland stinks. I've been to Portland.
But it's his team.
Stinks as a city. Oh man,
it's just Nike.
There's not a whole lot going on in Portland. It kind of smells in Portland, to be honest, too.
I talked to Melo when he was there. He was like, the sun's coming out finally.
Yeah.
In other words, he wasn't feeling it. Yeah.
Portland's, listen, out of all the cities that you can go visit, if you're somebody who hasn't really traveled the country, Portland should be pretty low on your list.
There's another factor here.
That's not to say, real quick, that's not to say that the Pacific Coast isn't beautiful. It is. I would still tell you to go to the Pacific Coast, but you don't need to go to Portland. You're better off going to Eugene. Eugene's a much better city than Portland. All right, that's it.
Thanks for the tip.
I think Richard agrees probably.
There's one more factor here before we get out of here. I do want to discuss that kind of wraps everything together here that I find interesting. Josue alluded to it a little bit earlier.